It's been over 6 months that America has dealt with the hardships of the COVID-19 pandemic. And whether it's getting kids back to school, getting people back to work, or simply stopping as many more people as we can from getting sick or dying from the virus, it's clear that the longer it takes for us to get control of the pandemic, the worse that the short and long-term effects on our country will be. In order to do these things, we need to rethink our testing system and build one that focuses on finding and isolating people who are infectious with the virus instead of finding everyone who's carrying it. Vaccines and treatments are the most likely things to come up if you're discussing how the COVID-19 pandemic will end. But one thing has been true since way back when this whole thing started. A good enough testing system can stop the uncontrolled spread of the virus far sooner than a vaccine can be invented and deployed. Yet it's August and we're still not testing enough people, and people who do get tests take far too long to see the results. This mainly boils down to the FDA's focus on only using tests that are most likely to identify if a person is infected and least likely to produce false negatives. And that makes sense. We know that people can still spread the virus even if they don't have symptoms, so it's really important that our testing system catch as many carriers of the virus as possible so that they can isolate themselves and be less likely to spread the virus to other people. However, that's meant that the FDA is only approving the use of tests that are very sensitive out of a fear of telling people that they've tested negative even though they were carrying the virus. But those tests cost a lot of money, and sometimes it takes days if not weeks for people to receive their results. As we've started to learn crucial new things about the virus, our testing system is failing to adapt. Our focus on making sure that people who are infected that get tests test positive is actually working against us. If we wanted a testing system that was effective in reducing the spread of the virus, sensitivity would not be the most important characteristic of the test that we use. Instead, we'd be focusing on tests that can be produced at a really large scale and tests that give results very quickly, all the while ensuring that they're just sensitive enough to detect people who have high enough viral loads to be infectious. As of right now, the amount of people that we can test is limited by both of those factors. Since we're requiring tests that are very sensitive, those tests can only be administered by professionals. So the amount of people that can be tested in any given area is capped at the capacity of testing facilities in that area. Furthermore, a person is unlikely to get another test before they receive the results from their last test. So when people are getting tested, they're not getting tested for whether or not they're infected now. They're getting tested for whether or not they were infected a few days ago. And most importantly, they're not being tested for whether or not they're infectious. The types of tests that I'm talking about exist. In fact, they're the ones that are being used in the White House. These tests recently received quite a bit of criticism because of their low sensitivity, but that gets to the crux of this whole issue. The tests are easy enough for people to administer themselves, so they can take them as often as they want, and they return results in about 15 minutes. If you're able to take the test at a high enough frequency, even just daily, it doesn't matter if they're low sensitivity, because they're still going to indicate if you have a high enough viral load to be infectious, at which point you can isolate yourself or seek medical attention. And that's what the government needs to be prioritizing. They need to be mass producing these tests and distributing them to households across the country. And they're uniquely capable to actually pull it off. The Defense Production Act can enable manufacturers to start pumping these things out at scale, and the Postal Service could be used to distribute them directly to households. That is, of course, if the administration wasn't actively trying to destroy it. And what better way to make sure that these tests were being taken on a consistent basis than to have them in our school systems, which currently cannot operate at full capacity because the virus is spreading out of control because our testing system sucks. Generally speaking, when a person initially gets the virus, it goes through an incubation period, during which time their viral load is too low for them to be infectious. If the body can't keep the virus in check, then it will grow exponentially and the viral load will spike, during which time they can infect other people. If the tests that we're using are only sensitive enough to detect when that spike is happening, then we can better target our isolation efforts. But that only works if we're able to test frequently enough. Right now, we can only test really infrequently, which means we have to assume that anybody who's been infected could be infectious. As a result, pretty much everybody has to assume that anybody can be infected and we all have to stay home. That worked well enough before we knew any better, but now we do know better and we need to make changes. If we lower the sensitivity level to only catch people who have a high enough viral load to be infectious, then we can produce tests at a much lower cost and we can make tests that people can take every day at home. Instead of having to have a professional shove a swab far up into your nasal cavity, you would simply swab the inside of your own nostril. Then you dip the swab into a tube of saline solution, remove it, replace it with the testing strip, close it up, and then go about getting ready for your day. In a few minutes, the testing strip will indicate whether or not you're infectious. There is a trade-off here. If you test negative, that does not mean that you're not infected, it just means that you're not infectious. So we would be relying on people developing good daily self-testing habits, but that shouldn't be a really hard sell. These tests are much, much cheaper, so you're getting them in 30 or 60 packs at a time. And if it means that we can all get back to normal that much quicker, wouldn't you be willing to take on the responsibility? It's just like brushing your teeth or something. The final obvious question is, why aren't we doing this already? The Gates Foundation has had these tests for months, but the FDA is blocking them because of the sensitivity issue. It really just seems like there's a complete lack of focus from leadership on this, which does make sense if you take into account the people who are running our federal government. After all, the president, for some reason, still keeps telling people that this virus is supposed to just disappear at some point. The best that we can do is spread awareness and hope that the folks who are in charge of making decisions like this start to understand the flaws in our current system. Also, we can stay educated on the evolving knowledge about COVID-19, so we're making sure that our expectations are correctly calibrated. And finally, when you're in the voting booth, make sure that you're voting for people who are ready and able to manage a large crisis like this. Obviously, I'm not a virologist and I'm not an epidemiologist. I relied on the work of Dr. Michael Mina, Lawrence Kitlikoff, Dr. Paul Sachs, and plenty of others in getting ready for this video. I learned so much about the virus in putting all of this together. I'm linking all of their work down below so that you can go read it. It's really great stuff. I encourage you to take a look. Thanks so much for giving me another 10 minutes of your time. I hope you learned something. Please share this one. I think it's really important that folks are aware of our increasing knowledge and capabilities around handling this pandemic. Like and subscribe if you don't mind. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.